Late 19th century colonialism. Trade flourished and markets expanded in the late 19th century. But this was not only a period of expanding trade and increased prosperity. It is important to realize that there was a darker side to this process. In many parts of the world, the expansion of trade and a closer relationship with the world economy also meant a loss of freedom and livelihood. Late 19th century European conquest produced many painful economic, social, and ecological changes, throughout which the colonized societies were brought into the world economy. Look at a map of Africa. You will see some countries' borders run straight as if they were drawn using a ruler. Well, in fact, this was almost how rival European powers in Africa drew up the borders, demarcating their respective territories. In 1885, the big European powers met in Berlin to complete the carving up of Africa between them. Britain and France made vast additions to the overseas territories. In the late 19th century, Belgium and Germany became new colonial powers. The US also became a colonial power in the late 1890s by taking over some colonies earlier held by Spain. Let us look at one such example of the destructive impact of colonialism on the economy and the livelihoods of colonized people. Rinderpest or the cattle plague. In Africa, in the 1890s, a fast spreading disease of cattle plague or rinderpest had a terrifying impact on people's livelihoods and the local economy. This is a good example of the widespread European imperial impact on colonized societies. It shows how, in this era of conquest, even a disease affecting cattle reshaped the lives and fortunes of thousands of people and their relations with the rest of the world. Historically, Africa had abundant land and a relatively small population. For centuries, land and livestock sustained African livelihoods, and people rarely worked for a wage. In late 19th century Africa, there were few consumer goods that wages could buy. If we had been an African possessing land and livestock, and there were plenty of both, you too would have seen little reason to work for a wage. In the late 19th century, Europeans were attracted to Africa due to its vast resources of land and minerals. Europeans came to Africa hoping to establish plantations and mines to produce crops and minerals for export to Europe. But there was an unexpected problem: a shortage of labor willing to work for wage. Employers used many methods to recruit and retain labor. Heavy taxes were imposed, which could be paid only by working for wages on plantations and mines. Inheritance laws were changed so that peasants were displaced from lands. Only one member of a family was allowed to inherit land, as a result of which the others were pushed into the labor market. Mine workers were almost confined in compounds and not allowed to move about freely. Then came Rinderpest, a devastating cattle disease. Rinderpest arrived in Africa in the late 1880s. It was carried by infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers invading Eritrea in East Africa. Entering Africa in the east, Rinderpest moved west like forest fire, reaching Africa's Atlantic coast in 1892. It reached the Cape, Africa's southernmost tip, 5 years later. Along the way, Rinderpest killed 90% of the cattle. The loss of cattle destroyed Africa's livelihoods. Planters, mine owners, and colonial governments now successfully monopolized what scarce cattle resources remained. To strengthen their power and to force Africans into the labor market. Control over the scarce resource of cattle enabled European colonizers to conquer and subdue Africa. Similar stories can be told about the impact of Western conquest on other parts of the 19th century world.